Raven, do you mind doing backup? Thank you. Any other final notes? We'll be letting people in just a second. People kind of file in over the first 5 to 10 minutes. So as you see those pop-ups, just ignore them. My team will take care of it. And I'm very grateful to have you both here today. So thank you for joining.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Doc is here. No freezing today. Everybody give a little retrograde prayer.
It's the best day.
Yeah, or maybe I'm not even gonna say anything.
Okay.
All right, let's do this. Oh, before I click that, so 2 p.m. You're both leaving, right? We're done at 2. I should have.
Yes. I have to leave. Yeah.
So with them, I mean, we'll see if the Q&A. Are we doing a Q&A, Nick? Still?
Yeah. Let's see how it goes. I mean, I feel like we'll talk, and then I'm sure we have a good audience with questions, and then we can also always, I can always pick up back from the Q&A.
Okay.
So, I think we'll talk for 45 minutes, then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay. And then
sounds good.
If for some reason there are no questions, then I'll just keep talking.
Perfect. Good.
Okay, hi Fawn. Let's go. Gonna admit everybody.
Cool.
No freezers. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining today. I'm Carolyn, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the super pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Anna Campbell and Casenya Sabolova. We are thrilled to welcome poet Oliver Baez Bendorf here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We encourage you to check the chat for a working document of some resources and actions. Today's conversation will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel where you can view the full archive of the series. And with that, I'll introduce our guest and host today. Artist Anna Campbell's research-based practice employs props, scaffold, and truss work to support models of representation for queer forms that challenge the gaze of classifying taxonomies. Campbell's work is in the collections of MoMA Library and the Leslie Lohman Museum, among others, and her site-specific bronze sculpture is permanently installed at the Lesbian History Archives in Brooklyn. New York-based writer and art historian, Dr. Casenya Sabolova specializes in queer art and culture. Her writings have appeared in the Brooklyn Rail, BOM, Hyperallergic, Art Agenda, and various exhibition catalogs. She has curated exhibitions at Canvas Mairie, La Mama, and Assembly Room. Soboleva has been a curatorial fellow at the Guggenheim and is currently the Andrew W. Mellon Postdoctoral Fellow in Gender and LGBTQ+ History at the New York Historical Society. With that, I would love to turn it over to you, Ksenia. Thank you all so much again.
Thanks so much, Carolyn, and thank you to the Brooklyn Rail for making this possible, and thank you to Anna for being here. I'm so excited to be in conversation with you. I was gonna wear the sweater from the exhibition, but it's a little warm. So as you noticed, I'm wearing something else of yours. I think you gave this to me, what, 5 years ago now? When did you make these?
Oh, wow. I think so. They might be a little bit more fresh than that. But this is
So for everyone, it says, Pride that old bitch.
Welcome to the season. You know what? I think I did that on the occasion of my 40th. So not 5 years. We're not that much of a.
I have
Pride's older. So.
I have no concept of time anymore.
Same, fair.
But I am so thrilled that you have a brilliant show at the Participant up right now. Dress rehearsal for a dream sequence. And I keep confusing, I keep saying dream rehearsal for a dress sequence. And I think actually your wife, Jill, was the one who said that first. And then since then I picked it up. But your work is very much like a riddle. And I find myself, you know, walking into the space and it's so familiar, but at the same time, there is something strange about it, right? And sort of have to sit with it to discover what that is. And every object, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Every object is underpinned by very elaborate, extensive research, and there's a story behind everything. And you gave me an amazing walkthrough when it first opened, and I was hoping that you would share some of those stories with our viewers today. But to begin, what is the dream sequence? Because you've had 2 prior projects, I think. It was apparatus for a dream sequence first in 2016, and then prototype for a dream sequence.
Exactly.
So how
Yeah.
did you arrive at this idea of a dream sequence?
So the dream sequence move, it's this sense that for folks who are marginalized, so much of our emotional, intellectual, political labor is hooked into reactive work, right? So an attack from this bit of legislation or that, you know, lobbying group, that kind of thing. And so what might it look like to think about moving towards a utopic vision of what we might really wish to have, and it not being a reactive one, and the real challenge of thinking that through. And so apparatus and prototype and dress rehearsal are all these ways to kind of make these minor incremental steps towards thinking about dream sequence as the moment of arriving at the imagining and envisioning. I was joking with someone who's visiting the show a while ago that the dream sequence show just by itself is like a decade out. There's going to have to be many more props and practice spaces before I'll feel myself ready to go into that dream territory.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's start at the beginning. So when you walk in, this is the first thing that you see, and it in your practice you use scaffolding as a metaphor for social construction, and then this light bulb installation of Title IX, and then if we can move to the next slide, you can also see the sort of wooden ribbon, or maybe the next one. We can just kind of go through it actually, sort of coming down, and that ribbon pattern is something that we'll see repeated throughout the exhibition. So could you speak a little bit to the scaffolding and what made you decide to, you know, feature Title IX so prominently? What role that played in your life? We can go back to the first slide, Carol.
So, you know, the scaffolding, it's showed up in different kinds of ways now for many years. And part of it is, as you're saying, thinking about social construction. So the material metaphor of the scaffold, the way that it has this kind of furtive quality where it's, you know, not meant to be permanent, not meant to be monumental, or the aspect of institutional that's, you know, that's central. And it's also in its modularity and in stable form as well. So it's pretty generative in terms of thinking about experimentation and working with the studio as a space of experimentation as a laboratory. And ways that the scaffold has showed up before have been, you know, scaffold on wheels, caster forms so that it's yet more immovable. What I wanted to do with Participant is really take advantage of that space in a way that felt different or more ambitious. And so what we'll see in some further slides are the scaffold, you know, kind of directly piercing through that major wall towards the back of the gallery space. but you asked about the Title IX move, and that one. So it's what greets you. I think there's something kind of I don't know, the idea that there would be a collection of jokes and central rewards, or different things that one would encounter throughout is important. And so walking into a show and it says title really large, I just find that to be kind of like the first clue for folks that this is how it's going to run. And then the 9 is on the ground, on the casters. And so it's not even quite allowed to be up with the rest of the title. And that sense of it being both critical enough to be rendered in these 2-foot tall letters, but also not solid enough to necessarily get the full headliner treatment is pretty important. There were a group of like 10-year-olds who came in early, like in the first week of the show, and Jill was saying, oh, have you heard of Title IX? And very like insulted, they were like, yeah, Title IX is how girls can do sports, like this is the easiest question, come on. And then started to ask questions around how is it that, is this going up? Is it coming down? What's happening? And so just reading formally what was going on and pulling into these conceptual hooks was really exciting. So it is doing those things, and it's also using a marquee aesthetic. So some of that dress rehearsal, like Welcome to the Theater, is in play here formally. And then, Title IX is from a bit of legislation from 1972, right? So for me, what that meant, like being a 7-year-old, say, in like 1986, meant that there was a full infrastructure set up already for girls to be able to play softball and soccer and any number of whatever else, the other 11 sports that I ended up playing at some point. And so that was for me a way to, really have a kind of childhood, which meant that I wasn't fundamentally alienated from myself and my body. And it's something for which I'm really grateful, right? And then it's also a piece of legislature where it came to do all this other work too, right? So it was under the Obama administration, transformed into a means of thinking about equity around sexual assault and safety for college students, and that being another kind of major feminist innovation. At the same time, for unfortunately multiple folks that I've talked to about this show, it's also been a means of complaint and a way of kind of misappropriating the intention of the legislation as a opportunity to attack queer, feminist, marginalized professors. And so that's been one unexpected, kind of astonishing aspect of its legacy, along with, of course, for folks who caught the Times reporting as a benchmark of really, really poor journalism in covering and legitimizing really foul claims around the impact of trans kids playing sports. And so the ways that Title IX is both able to do these really contrary anti-feminist, anti-queer, anti-trans moves at the same time that it's carved out this particular space is a kind of set piece that is happening in this first scene that offers a sort of sensibility that's in play throughout, and that there's a lot of thinking about legacy and chosen family and biological family, and the frictions of inheritance, and what you couldn't be more grateful or indebted for, and then what you might still be in incredibly resentful around. And so that sort of swirl is, yeah, we'll probably get into that some more, but that's sort of the first move.
Yeah, and as you know, we have an exhibition on the history of Title IX up at the Historical Society right now. And you and I are going to do an interview about that as well. So be on the lookout for that.
I'm so down. That's going to be great.
It, as you say, you know, it celebrates Title IX while at the same time addressing the ways in which it has been abused and used by right-wing conservatives to exclude trans people and other marginalized communities. And so let's look, while we're standing here, if you look to the right, you see the next slide. Will you talk a little bit about these, Anna? You have, what made you arrive at woodworking? You have such a way of this meticulous crafting of wooden objects that is so unlike anything that I've seen. And we don't have a close-up of this too, because
I think we do.
It's different. There are different types of wood, and it really puts forward wood as this very erotic material.
Yeah, right, because wood is natural. It has all this bodily potential to it. I mean, when you're looking at anything like the veneer or even just the plywood, you're looking at like the interior slice or the like unpeeled spot of the inside of a tree. So it should feel I don't know, at least a little bit naughty, but maybe also like a little bit terrifying. The kind of like sexy violent back and forth is definitely something that I think folks encounter, and then however you talk about it then ends up being like one more Rorschach test about what's going on in the work. So so this particular piece, right, it's called Chest, and it's actually pretty much exactly as tall as I am, or at least to the shoulder. And the base is from a previous work, a battering ram for Stormy, for Marcia, for Sylvia, and that it was the kind of brace that sat on top of this rolling scaffold, and it had a battering ram made out of a parking meter. So, you know, happy pride, there's a disco ball floating under that, just so that you could enjoy the mayhem that you're making. And so it was, you know, living with that piece in the studio, and also bringing in these new rolls of veneer. And you know, there's something about wood generally, as you're saying, but this roll of hickory came out, and it was just such a disappointment, because I had wanted this really even, perfect pattern, and that's not what you get, because that's not how trees work when you're actually dealing with a thing that has been alive. And so it took me, I guess, probably longer than I'd like to admit, to really just kind of feel like, why do I keep, what's different about this, and why do I feel like, you know, there's this kind of enchanted quality of this particular piece of hickory. And so the work just ended up being this quick gesture, breaking the rules of formal marquetry and inlay, and just really roughly applying. And so there's something in this one that I think is useful as part of a kind of key to the rest of the show, that it's something where you're seeing some pretty rough and quick gestures, for example, with the bow tie valet piece, and something really fussy and really fetishistically worked with in the diagram with the pearl necklace. But then in Chest, it's just sort of like a love affair to the material and to the making.
Yeah. this is almost that photograph of those three pieces next to each other, almost like a trailer for your show.
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
film, right.
Uh-huh.
And each object in a way is a character. It's like a cast of characters. And the show, I guess we didn't mention that the show is essentially divided into 3 scenes. And so right now we've been looking at scene 1, and then we move into scene 2. Is the baseball bat still part of scene 1?
Yeah, the baseball bat's like the coda, right? Because that needs to
Let's go
round
to
out the Title IX moment.
Where is it? There it is. And so you made this.
Yeah.
Is it wood turning, or how do you?
Yeah, it's turned on a lathe, and it's ash, which is, as I learned, understood as the aluminum of wood. So it's the idea that you would have something really nice and springy being part of it. Yeah.
And again, this is, you could read this as a Title IX reference, but at the same time, it's very much a sexual object, right? And a fetish object. What do you think makes a fetish object? And I think of your work as being in dialogue with people like, Merritt Oppenheim, and being very informed by surrealism, which is something that I want to talk about as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, fun. I mean, it's the fact is, in this country, anything that has to do with sports is already fully fetishized, right? Because it's like a means by which we organize identity and allegiance and connect across generations, and especially in a culture that really dials down the amount of ways that masculine people can like communicate with one another. There's something that ends up being supercharged in anything that is sport related in any way. So that's definitely in play. In terms of the making of the thing, it's really a not uncomplicated process, in that you're using calipers to get the particular dimensions of the piece going, but the last, I want to say, 6 hours is just sanding it, right, and just moving down into different kinds of more and more kind of luscious grits, and then oiling it up. So there's just a way that the process informs the read, and I think that people who get to see the thing in person, especially where you can see where it's got a little bit of a reflection, or if you happen to have like an illicit, like feel the edge of the bat moment, it's just astonishingly smooth. So the evidence of its making definitely does that. And then it, as you're saying, yeah, it's like giving sex toy vibes. It's giving like, but also a little bit like, is this some sort of like modernist sculpture? Like, what is the Brancusi take on the bat? Would it look something like this? So for me, what that also does, and what I quite like, is that it points us to the way that the whole category of modernist sculpture is its own profound fetish quality, and isn't in fact so different from, say, really nice bat.
And this idea of the process of making informing the reading of the work is I think a great way to think about your work. And I did a studio visit earlier with Benny Maris, and he was telling me, and he said that I could retell the story. He was telling me about a friend who worked on a nuclear submarine, and in order to work on the nuclear submarine, you had to remake the tools yourself that are necessary to work on the nuclear submarine. And so this idea of understanding something by meticulously reconstructing it, almost like a test, is really interesting. Actually, we didn't talk about the poster at the right, which is the announcement for the show. I think the next slide has a better image of it. Will you speak a little bit to that as well?
Yeah, well, that's a beautiful way to cue it up. So, you know, in the fall, I was at Sculpture Space upstate in Utica, New York, and that's where all the wood turning happened. And I also had this just kind of feeling of, I need to figure something out. And the thing I decided I needed to figure out was like, what is going on with this slant step? And for a certain kind of like group of sculptors, this is like a very iconic object, right? It was discovered by a professor at UC Davis and handed off to Bruce Nauman and became this kind of like object that traveled around and is finally now back home in the museum there. But it's this idea of, it was a little step and it had this kind of slanted form to it, and so it's kind of like a sculpture and it's kind of like a functional object, and it's really not clear what's going on with it. And it had like a linoleum surface, and so that was quite worn, and so it was really sort of this beautiful enigma that became quite inspirational. And I just thought, like, but what does it feel like? So I ended up digging up the dimensions, and I made a copy of it. And there was a point at which I was making this copy, and the tracking on the bandsaw blades at Sculpture Space, it's just like a beautiful space, but everything feels very dangerous. Depending on what, you know, how finely tuned you're used to things being done. And I just thought, you know, this beautiful swooping edge of this step is, I'm gonna not be able to make it work, and I'll just do my best and we'll see what happens. But it's going to be really rough, and I'll just have to trust that the rest of making this thing is going to tell me something. And it, you know, I rough the thing out and I take it over to the belt sander to clean it up. And this astonishing thing happens where it's sort of like a key in a lock. And what I'm trying to hit in terms of the form perfectly locks into the belt sander. And it's just exquisite. And it's like this moment where like all of my skin just kind of like, the hair stands on end, and you get this sense of like, oh my God, all of the work that I'm doing is about these generational connections, but I hadn't thought about, you know, finding this link to this whole, you know, generations of folks working in a shop. But it's because that's such a standardized, like, this is the tool that we use, that diameter of the drum was perfectly replicated. And I just had this thing of like, well, I can't show the step because it's going to take people in the wrong direction. And so that's where I realized, okay, I need to have a partner in sharing this moment. And so I got in touch with Oliver, who's with us today, and whose poem to essentially describe the sensibility of what that sense of awakening in making manages to create. So
yeah. And throughout the show you have several collaborations with other queer people as well.
Yeah, it was really important to do that, to kind of invite folks in. This is a spell by Jonah Welch, and the bronze fig leaf is my own, and Jonah's assembled the rabbit fur skins and other secret ingredients that are locked within that, and that are sort of operating as a kind of overseeing protective role in the exhibit.
And I missed this. I didn't see it.
Yeah,
I think maybe it went up after. Was it there at the opening?
No, it was there. Yeah, I was taking care of things. Yeah, but it's, it's stealth, and that seemed important. We can talk
Yeah.
about it
Very
outside of
high
its presence because it's, a different situation. But yeah.
Let's move on to scene 2. So more scaffolding. And then when you approach the next slide, this thing is kind of on top of it. I forget what this is called.
Yeah, this is a finial, and it's after the finials in Christopher Street Park, across the street from the Stonewall. And if anyone has more information about that park, I would just so love to figure out more there, because it's a labyrinth, and the idea that that form would be exterior to that park is kind of bananas. I mean, it feels like this sort of anticipatory spell also for the space. And of course, those are not lavender silicone as this one is. But yes, so I wanted to kind of bring that into the space, and it's cast by a friend and former student, CJ Lee, who's quite expert in this sort of thing. Yeah.
But that is very much how you work. You observe and then absorb these things from your surroundings, and then you think about the ways in which queer identity is embedded in these objects and architectural spaces. And do you just keep a constant archive of things that you're like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder, what do Americans say? I'm gonna file this for later. or were all these things, were you working with these particular things with the participant show in mind? Or I guess, how long is the life of each of Anna Campbell's objects of interest?
Yeah, I mean, it's a range, I guess. I mean, something sort of like this adaptive device arrive as if by unexpected encounter, and just immediately must be kind of rolled into the exhibit. This is also a residency find. The oldest piece in the show is about 10 years old. And
is that the chest?
That's the crate.
The crate.
Yeah.
Yes, the crate. Should we go to that?
Yeah, let's go to that.
I was actually gonna ask you if you wanted to talk about that, and I was hoping that you would, because it is how you met your wife, and it's such a cute story. It's one of my favorite meet cute stories. But after this, we'll go back to these things as well. I don't want to give away what they are. I almost want to do a quiz, like what do viewers think these are, and then where is it? It's up, Carol.
I think it's towards the end of the scene. It's quite a bit further.
But it's on top of the scaffolding. It's the image that's no, go down. There it is, 31. Yes.
So
okay, so this is the oldest piece.
So this is 10 years old. And so my partner is Jill Cassad, and her first book is called Sewing Empire. And in that text, she does a lot of heavy lifting in terms of talking about landscape and the politics of landscape. And one of the places it goes is to dig into this case study of the ladies of Llangollen, who were Irish women who ran away to Wales to be together, start a sort of decorative kind of farm, and that there was something in the project that gave them a little bit of an alibi, plausible deniability for, running away together. And so that's the silhouette that you're seeing, and they're in this kind of riding gear that would have been gesturing towards some local traditional garments, but also have this other more masculine kind of presentation. So that's what the read is. And I had I'd been doing some collaborative work, and Cass had as well, and I had visited in anticipation of another project, the Lesbian Herstory Archives, and I was rolling through their photo collection, which is pretty astonishing. And one of the things that's in there is this collection of photos someone had taken, having gone to see the ladies of Llangollen, their place. And it looked like they were all taken on one of those disposable cameras, right? So the quality was really poor. The focus was not really happening. The lighting was a little bit off in that, the windows were blowing out the scenes, and everything looked quite dark. And so just the capacity to not actually be able to see was its own. I mean, it's ready for a project. And one of the funniest things is that the folks in charge of the place had seen fit to remove the mattress from their bed, which of course just leaves like this rope matrix that would have been underneath. And so just like it looked all the more wildly sexual without the mattress. And so the prospect Cassidy raises of, well, maybe there should be, in sharing those images with her, maybe there should be some kind of collaboration we should work on. And so immediately, close the laptop and bolt to the wood shop, and I'm building this crate, and I put a grow light in it, and I pack it up and screw it down, and I mail it off. And the next part of it happens basically 6 months later, because they basically don't open it. But that crate has become this object which essentially holds all kinds of correspondence and all kinds of like emotional origin story, and it is something that I think it wasn't clear, can this be a sculpture, or is really only this other sort of object? But there's so much in terms of thinking function versus decorative object versus spell versus installation component in the work, that it seemed really important to maybe let this one come out for the occasion. And yeah.
Wait, you didn't tell the best part.
Oh, you like the,
Jill didn't open the crate. And can I tell
No. Yeah, you should tell. Yeah.
Jill didn't open the crate for months. And
No.
so Anna made a little crate for a screwdriver and sent a screwdriver to Jill. At which point Jill did open it. And
Yeah.
Jill has told me that they knew that once the crate would be opened, their life would change, which is so beautiful. So let's go back a little bit and start at scene 2 again. So there is a wooden object there that is echoed in 3 more or 4 that are lying down, 4, and they are the heads of the magic wand, different heads of the magic wand vibrator with internal condoms stretched over them. What is the story behind these?
Well, so this is another, I think, model of thinking about what one inherits in terms of the Hitachi magic wand being, I think, like the ore vibrator from the 70s and 80s that would have had like all kinds of connotations around like thinking about lesbian culture and what you maybe wouldn't have access to knowing until you really were an insider. And so just thinking about variations on that form. And of course, you know, they're turned on a lathe, right? So as you're as you're making them, they're spinning wildly. They're doing essentially a version of what they would be doing in the instance of the original in terms of being in motion. And at similarly, when you get to the stage of drilling out the inside or sanding things so that there's a really kind of smooth, soft edge to them. You know, I have all these videos. I was like, oh, I should probably post this, and I completely chickened out because they're just like the most obscene possible kind of work in progress imagery. Just like, yeah, sort of caked sawdust everywhere. But you know, there's something about those forms that I think is really inviting, and that it's also feels really bodily and gendered, but it's really not clear what, like how or in what way. Like, and you know, the other thing, the inverts, you could think about that in terms of the direction, maybe the affordances such as they are with the work are in play, right? There's like an inside, some outside, there's like that aspect of it, but then invert also as one of those terms that would have meant queer in a previous moment, or would have indicated that. And there's a way that often I'm liking to use titles as a kind of pry bar, basically, to let folks into some of the bibliography that is rolling around for me.
Yeah, and actually on that note, one of my favorites is this little sculpture hiding behind this sheet of latex, and the title is Imitation with Original, which I'm guessing is a Judith Butler reference, imitation without an original. So maybe this is a good point for me to ask you what the queer theorists and I mean, I guess not just queer, or what are the writings that you're informed by? And you're a professor yourself, like academia is a big part of your life. You're married to Jill, who's a fantastic queer theorist and historian and just scholar of visual culture. So what informs you in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of wild cacophony of things, I guess, in that, you know, you tag the Butler, and that's definitely what was cooking for me in this moment, right? Because it's that idea of the imitation without an original, and in the realm of, you know, digital files, 3D digital forms, what would it mean for there to be an original? And in terms of, you know, this is a 3D print coming from that, you know, a digital file. How might you understand it as a original or not? And I was thinking about, and this is probably the first entree into that territory, where you know, I'm trying to, in a space where it's pretty clear to folks that there is not a singular original kind of, you know, digital file, or that there's a sort of like horizontal rather than hierarchical relationship to copies. What would it mean to just kind of like create an object that's trying to do both, right? That's trying to show you the non-singularity of the digital while also telling you something about what's going on in terms of gender as imitative, performative thing. And the idea that this is also a scan from my grandparents' living room that would have been a component of a lamp, right? This is the mask lamp, and there's a femme lamp as well. But they both look almost exactly the same. So the gender markers are just like really worn down. I guess I want to say, in, you know, to tag the rest of your question, that that it's a lot of really vernacular inputs, but then also some real kind of high theory work too. So I suppose like Jack Halberstam's work around female masculinity definitely kind of like blew up something in my mind about thinking about how to contextualize this cross-generational homage labor that I was doing. I'm really excited by the Paul Preciado work broadly, but in particular work that has to do around thinking space and architecture. And yeah, I used to work for a public arts commission, and thinking object space and the public has been also a pretty exciting territory to think about basically how embodiment shows up. And so it's a lot of queer and feminist sort of maybe not too surprising cuts, but then also the public art territory, which I think maybe veers off a little bit more than where folks might imagine.
Yeah. And in terms of feminist history, there's also a Dworkin reference. In the next one, let's talk about that one. That one is fun. So it's the piece that's on the floor. I think we have one more slide where you can actually read the text. So the thing on the left is a found object, and then the thing on the right you made in wood, and it's different lines. One is from Dworkin, and the other one is from, remind me?
Stephen Sondheim. So Sondheim gets the top 3 ribbons, and then Dworkin is the bottom 2. So it starts out, some people got it and make it pay. Some people can't even give it away. This people's got it, and this people's spreading it around. But someday someone will notice that people called women were buried in a long silence that meant dissent, and that the pornographers with needles set in like the teeth of a harrow chattered on. And so it's like, you know, you're reading it to yourself, maybe if you're there, and it's kind of like, it's got like this rhythm, and it's kind of sing-song, and it's doing like traditional rhyming patterns. And then somewhere through the middle of the Dworkin, it's just kind of like we've gone fully off the rails and onto this other territory. And you know, so, and it's kind of wild, right? Because the Sondheim part is from Gypsy, and it's the mother basically making the case that I'm the talented one. The headliner, the daughter, is, you know, just lucky to have gotten my support. And, you know, and it's wild in terms of how thick gender is in that show, to be using the people, some people, language, because it's, you know, it's not people, it's women, right? And then going into the Dworkin, people called women, right, is this just very, very elastic kind of descriptive term that's super expansive and incredibly trans-inclusive, and and yet you know, in
she
the way
wrote
that
it in a very essentialist way.
Right. I mean, that's not where the intent was in that particular space. But people called women, the quote is pulled in there because it's the name of the feminist bookstore that was around in Toledo, Ohio when I was a teenager, right? and it was around the corner from my house, and it was like the place, right, where it was possible to essentially find a community and have a sense of safety and a sense of future and a connection to a shared history that you weren't really totally clear what that was until you got there. Right, so like a site of belonging that was other than, you know, cross-country team or like a, you know, that other kind of like model of connective affiliation. And yeah, so it's exciting to see in this case, not just the ways that Dworkin is coming back and being reconsidered in the contemporary moment, but also like rethinking what her, however complicated, you know, and very complicated work was doing, was also making space for other kinds of dissent.
Yeah, yeah. And the ribbon from the first installation, from the Title IX installation, comes back here.
Precisely, yeah. So you get a little sense of like visual continuity. There's a space from which you can take a look at this ribbon, have that ribbon before you, and then have the tall boy with the parquetry.
Yeah.
And
the certain college aesthetic is a big part of your work as well. I feel, and I guess we'll get to that in scene 3, where you made college sweaters. Do you wanna? I guess we haven't spoken about your grandfather's toolbox. That's 36, Carolyn. I think that's Anna, we're talking too much. We're gonna run out of time.
It's easy to be chatty.
This is one of my favorite pieces. It's your grandfather's.
It's a fastener cabinet, right? So he was a bus driver and then a handyman, and had been he did two tours, I guess, in the WPA. So it's just like incredibly handy, and was a handyman after he retired, just to kind of keep a hand in, I guess. Sorry for the and I held on to this, and you know, I really like to scavenge and scrounge, and so it's a testament that this is such an eclectic and curious collection of things that I wasn't even able to mine it and dig into it. But what you're seeing is that collection of fasteners, an undershirt of his that's folded up, and then a 3D print of the harness from a He-Man action figure, kind of blown up to about 5 inches tall, that's also doing this kind of fastener labor with its buckles at the back and different kind of hinge bits. So thinking about, again, like kind of connectivity over a range of different sources.
Yeah. Let's move on. These are also, so these move around. You can, and I remember when I was seeing it for the first time, I told you that they look like ladders for an empty library that you have yet to discover, and that relates to me. It speaks to that experience of you know, finding your queer identity and going to the library and looking for proof, right? And then when you go to the back of the space, we enter scene 3, and there is a scaffolding that is piercing the face of a woman.
Right. Yeah, that's the you know,
It's such a striking image.
Not willing to forget. It's stills from Anita Bryant being pied in the face, and it's this fantastic direct action that is fully humorous, but also I think just kind of iconic in terms of what what we owe it as a technology of protest. So there she is, burned into these cornhole games. So it's Corn Pie Hole is the title of that little vignette. And I think around the back too, folks maybe saw briefly that it's propped up and held in place with 2 10-pound bags of oranges. And so digging into that, affiliation where Bryant was a spokesperson for Florida Oranges, and the way that kicked off orange boycott at a lot of gay bars. And, it's in some ways a kind of curious, very particular footnote, but it's also, I think, just for me, a really satisfying anecdote that gives you a sense of the many ways that we're able as a community to protest. And so this as a kind of remembrance of that moment that recasts it in a way, unfortunately, that hits still a little bit too topically. There's a lot in the show, I think I said, that was understood to be introspective and generated during pandemic isolation, and in fact has sadly become, for example, with the Florida Don't Say Gay bill, which is actually primarily going to be injurious to trans kids. It's not words that were not intended to be topical of that, nevertheless end up still pointing to aspects of our contemporary moment.
Mm-hmm. I think the footnote is such an articulate way of thinking about your practice as well. In a way, when you read a dissertation or a book and there is a parallel narrative just in the footnotes, that sometimes is more interesting than the primary. Can reconstruct this whole other story. Let's talk about the sweaters because they're so fun, and then we should open it up for questions. It's in scene 3. Look, and I have one. People keep asking me where I got it, and I don't know if there are still some available.
It was a run of 50, and we're down to probably less than half that. So for folks who want to visit the space, there are broadsides with the poem, and they're sweatshirts, and one can join the convent.
Of pleasure. So it reads: Convent of Pleasure, amid talk of relationship, unmarried by choice.
Yeah, and it's, so the title I'm giving it is prefigurative merch, and it's meant to be an object in the space, right? So like the rack and the collection of them, but it's also meant to be understood as a kind of rhizomatic installation. And it's a lot of the work that I've done in terms of editions is about really aggressively grabbing this vernacular and using it to insinuate into just, the straight world, as it were. And so the very specific backstory here is that I went to a college in a pre-internet moment that I hadn't realized had hired a woman to be its president. And then when it became evident that she was in a domestic partnership with a woman who's an English professor at a neighboring college, that offer was then no longer on the table. And not knowing that, and sort of being at that college the whole time, and then retroactively learning about it, is this kind of shock, right, in terms of thinking that some sense of where you are, and then being really disabused of that. But then in addition to that very specific history, I should tag the partner, Anne Shaver, was a Margaret Cavendish scholar and put together an edited volume of Cavendish's plays. So Convent of Pleasure was one of those, and was the title of the edited volume. And it's a totally madcap comedy of errors, comedy of genders, gender of errors, and basically the other move that I hope that these sweatshirts are making is that they help really kind of offer us a way to reimagine what an institution of higher learning might be like, and how that might be, for example, sisterhood defined in really broad terms, how that might be pleasure oriented, how that how we might think about organizing intellectual and mentorship kind of models that are different from the ones that we currently have, which are based on hierarchy and are based on, insurmountable tuition debt as one of the major products of a contemporary university. And of course, the activists and intellectuals writing now around pleasure activism, I think, are probably some of the most formative folks in that dialogue.
Mm-hmm. And also how you embody certain ideas by wearing something, right? Like that's a big thing in sports, in colleges, and these are sweaters. You made handkerchiefs. You make things that that people can wear as well. I think that we can open it up for questions, but Anna, thank you so much. I love just hearing you talk about the work. Some of it is still a riddle to me. I love just being in this space, and finding something new every time. Like I have to go back to see the leaf. And I guess actually one last question that I do have is that touch is such an important part of it. Because of these materials that you use and because of the erotics of it, do you expect your viewers to touch the work? Because
yeah, well, I mean,
allow.
Two fast stories. One is that I used to be a museum guard, and one of my favorite things to do was to close up at night, because you could put your like full palm in the middle of a painting, I won't say which, and just have like just the most exquisite sort of like experience, and two, that my grandmother lived really close to Marion in Pennsylvania, and so I was able to take her to the Barnes Foundation before it moved to the new place, which doesn't smell right, and she was walking down the hallway and just took her full hand and slid it along a piece of furniture as she was walking, just like 10 feet. And it was like, she was just like so comfortable and, enjoying that particular space. And furniture does something different, right? Because it's not like in that land of sculpture where it feels intimidating, or where it feels like it's got something that is inaccessible to you. So yeah, all the like deep excitement around working with functional objects, it's really critical. And two, I mean, like the idea that people would come up and touch the sweatshirts and like push through those. I think that there's ways of figuring something out through touch that's just really not able to be substituted through other means. I mean, it's why I built the slant step. So I hope not to upset Leah too much by saying this, but absolutely people should take some liberties.
Yeah, and like feeling something up, right? This also, I don't think you and I have ever talked about Kate Millett and her furniture.
Oh my gosh, that's so incredible.
This should be another event.
Let's please do that. Bookmark.
Yes. do we have questions for the audience? Anna, thank you so much. I
you.
have to run in 10 minutes, but I'm gonna stick around for a little bit. But if I don't,
Yeah, we can do questions for sure. Be exciting. And if you need to jump ship, also fine.
Yes. Thank you both so much. I do feel like we need 20 more parts to this conversation. Our first question is from GE. You can go ahead and unmute GE.
Thank you so much. I love the fact, first of all, I love the fact that the board, which had the Sondheim Dworkin quotes, was so wonderfully echoing of the fact that he loved to collect boards himself, especially gaming boards, parquet boards. You'd go to his apartment, they were all over the place on all the walls. So there's such a connection there on a different kind of level. It's just wonderful. But my question was, can you talk a little bit about perhaps making and constructing and fashioning and how it can be deployed to access like new extensions, kind of almost tactility again, but new extensions to perform possibilities and desire?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first, thank you, G, so much for the insider info, the Sondheim Gas. That's fantastic. I mean, in a sort of very literal David Halperin way, I was hoping, if this would help the show be gay by having him involved. But yeah, I mean, that's the mission really of the whole practice, I think, for me is what are the tools and how can we build new tools to do the kind of tasks that are required for the moment. And so, to just tag back to the baseball bat one more time, something that can be protective as a weapon, something that can be a come on in terms of what it's offering visually or sensually, is definitely an example of that. The way that the second scene of the show is a kind of like creating an enclosure that really is critical to me, in that you'll find yourself like a little bit more maybe in a protected space. It's not impermeable, but it's one that I think hopefully finds itself being a bit more intimate. And similarly, the back room, as it were, right? Especially given the history of 253 East Houston as formerly being El Mirage, the sex club that I'm sure had any number of back rooms. So running, for example, the literal tool that I made the work with, right, which is that vacuum pump, and running that as a sort of design object and element in the project itself. It's I think the aspiration that I would suggest these different tools and props, and it's also the hope that folks encountering these objects would imagine other uses and misuses for them.
Uses and misuses. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for that answer. There's a lot of questions, but I know we're short on time. I would love to ask on Brody's behalf, who wrote an excellent question in the chat. Can you speak to finding inspiration and centering what in a single generation have become ghostly, historic, iconic gay male spaces / signifiers / tools, sex clubs, etc. Places where many butch and trans masculine people have found and identified ourselves and our desires. However, we were largely not seen or welcome in those spaces.
Oh, wow, that's like, I feel like these are also going like right into the root. This is like full marrow grade questions. Yeah, I find myself really, honestly, quite frequently going to signifiers that tag what would be read more readily as gay male culture. And so in some cases, the Sondheim Dworkin duet is a real departure in that it's trying to tag maybe a balance more of what one would understand as like lesbian feminist territory and gay male territory, and compressing them through the magic of the marquetry like fractal puzzle into one object that they would otherwise never be able to exist in. I mean, one version of this is probably a sort of super Freudian territory that has to do with, you know, like if I feel like my closest cultural links are to a lesbian feminist territory, it, you know, the exotic aspect or the sense maybe of projected freedom in gay male spaces just seems to have a particular allure that is really charged and exciting, and maybe isn't troubled by knowing what's otherwise more objectionable that you would know from a space of deeper intimacy. I also feel like style is something that, for reasons of survival in a feminist context, at least for a moment or for a vocal collection of women, it was really important to eschew, to block, to disavow in different ways. And for someone who's making work, that idea is just a little bit heartbreaking, right? Because style can offer so much and has all kinds of power for orienting our sense of the world and how it's organized and how one might intervene in it and how one might make it your own. So there's, I guess, that hunk of it. And then I I guess there's the other complicated version too, which is I remember at a certain moment covering my studio walls with all the pages of whatever was the sort of most sorted gay male style magazine at the time. And just kind of like having that as an experiment to think about what, you know, where is that attraction? And so is it about a model for thinking transmasculinity? Is it something that one might wish to embody in a personal way? Is it a way to think about what maybe I would describe as my own effeminacy? So like a sort of refusal or failure to tag a particular kind of traditional masculinity, but that being something other than what I understand as an actual toughness, which is more like a butch territory that I find myself like not able to potentially approach with that same sense of being convincing. Yeah, I feel like this is the kind of question that I could just kind of keep unspooling and trying to work through as a career project.
Wow, thank you for that answer. Thank you so much, Lee, for asking. We have one more question, Anna, but I do know the time, so I want to give space also. Yeah, for the our reading, we are really lucky to have Oliver. We have a film video from Oliver today, who was the poet commissioned for the exhibition, and I will just read his bio briefly. Poet Oliver Baez Bendorf is the author of 2 books of poems, Advantages of Being Evergreen and The Spectral Wilderness. He has received fellowships and awards from the NEA and the Publishing Triangle. Born and raised in Iowa, he now lives in the Pacific Northwest. He founded and directs Spellworks and teaches in the low residency MFA program for writers at Warren Wilson College. And with that, I'm going to welcome this special video from Oliver.
Hello, everyone. My name is Oliver Baez Bendorf. Thanks so much for having me. To the folks at the Brooklyn Rail, Anna, many thanks for looping me into your show through poetry and to this event. I'm super happy to be here. When Anna invited me to write a poem for a dress rehearsal for a dream sequence, I had been working on some poems that I imagined as wall texts for sculptures that didn't otherwise exist. I'll read one of those and then close with my poem that's on the broadside for Anna's show. I want biodegradable sex. Polypropylene, moss, human hair, pine needles, cardboard, sheepskin condoms, coffee grounds. This sculpture reveals the demand my transition has created for the plastics industry over time. By melting plastic syringes into a compressed form, I hope to create an anticlimax by showing all at once the slow accumulation of material. When you observe me and then the sculpture, is the volume of plastic more or less than what you would expect? Do you agree strongly, agree, neither agree nor disagree, disagree, or strongly disagree that certain plastics should remain single-use? By incorporating an assortment of organic elements, I wanted to create a sense of grief out of the cognitive dissonance. Plasticos, to form or mold, an art long before plastics were invented. Trans is a way of arranging the world through change, but plastic is durable, meaning it never goes away. Very light, gets blown along in gentle winds. It gets washed by rain into sewers, streams, rivers, and finally oceans. It burns forever in landfills, a sickening campfire around which we tell scary stories. It is pleasurable at times when a container fulfills the functions for which it has been designed. I hope to return to Earth a little bit more every day until I'm finally you again. When Anna reached out to me in the winter, she wrote me, quote, "There's something electric to the idea of discovering there are things we can make that fit perfectly within a particular tradition or model without any generational link or communication beyond the fact of the longevity of a tool and a desire for the design," end quote, which I loved. At the time, I was breaking in a new pair of jeans, and I had become enthralled by the mythology, folklore, tradition, and some facts I found about the process of fitting a pair of jeans to your body, including how subtle ways a pair of jeans fits can be a queer cue, which is what I wanted. In writing this poem, I imagined undertaking, over the course of a single day, all of the various tips and tricks for breaking in jeans. So here, and also on a broadside that visitors can take with them from dress rehearsal for a dream sequence, is my poem, Denim Day. Denim Day. I smell the stars. Amy Lowell. Deep blue. Everything good you feel smells earth in the air, strange fabric. Moon pulls the blur from any embarrassment you would otherwise perceive. Drizzle softens the fibers. It tenderizes, then labors through soaking, letting the denim learn you are blue and snug and topical skin. The weave continues on the street. Cloud belly cloaks you for queer gossip. The day's body. The sun squawks through smeared blood of gods reconstituted by thick clouds over the parking lot. What a smell. Dampened whiskers shoot across transparencies while briefly fog recedes. Your indigo thighs know nothing but letting the jeans learn. The field again. Vehicles return to coffee hot in your mug. A notebook. And shapes it to your water, and you lay there soaking. Crisis is an animal running another red light. You are becoming one. What lunges across the linoleum blooms feverish. The day evacuates near the bottom of its courtship with your matter. The day's another cloud reaching the top. Your twill silhouette offers strange angles against cabinets. Residues relax into the blood of gods. Vapor enters by expanding the body beyond the body, teaching genes how to follow. Sheets. You dream a party, and the night is indigo and pulp. A seagull flies by and calls to the overnight embrace between two yellow threads. You elongate and let color join the porcelain with the fog. So that's all from me. Thanks so much, and have a great day, everybody.
Amazing. Thank you, Oliver. Yeah, it's such a treat to hear that. Thank you endlessly, really, Anna and Ksenia. We would also, of course, like to thank Leah, participant, for helping really make today possible. As a small nonprofit, we do need your support. Please check the chat for a link to donate to support our operations here at the Rail, like our daily NSE. And join us Monday, 1 p.m. for a conversation with Audrey Flack and Jason Rosenfeld. And you can now turn on your microphone, say goodbye as you leave. Thank you both so much for such an amazing conversation. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ksenia.
Thank you,
for
Anna.
these beautiful questions.
Thank you, Anna.
Thanks, Ksenia. Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you, Fung.
Thank you, Oliver, for the reading. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Wonderful
Leah.
to see
Yeah.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Congratulations, Anna.
Hey, Ali.
253
Congratulations,
lives.
Bye, bye, bye.
Go
See the
see the show,
show.
you guys. Congratulations. Go see the show, please.